You just gave him 40 years. Well, guess what? So,
man. I didn't do anything wrong, man.
This is Ricky Hand, who is facing charges for multiple armed robberies in Ohio. Ricky was charged with aggravated robbery, attempted safecracking, abduction, breaking and entering.
Give me 40 years, sir.
Ricky had been on a robbing spree for years, and he was most likely getting confident in his ability. However, his romance with robbing quickly turned sour the night he tried to rob John's drive-thru in Springfield, Ohio. In the footage here, we can find the owner of the shop beginning to close down for the night. However, Ricky Hand had other plans. As Ricky begins to make his way to the door, he's greeted by the owner, who is armed and begins firing to scare Ricky off. The owner then called the police to inform them that there had just been an attempted robbery at the shop, which resulted in a man getting shot.
911 emergency.
Yeah, this is John's drive-thru, West Main Street. A guy just tried to rob me and I shot him. He ran out the back door.
Okay, is he injured?
I think I hit him.
Well, as it turns out, he did in fact hit him, because only 2 days later, a man admitted himself to the nearby hospital to treat bullet wounds. It didn't take long for police to piece together that this was most likely the robber they were looking for. Arrests were made at the hospital, and Ricky was questioned that night.
Tried to rob John's drive-thru. Got shot 3 times. I did the crime, I ain't gonna lie. I just wanted to live.
If you thought the crimes were horrendous enough, wait until you see how Ricky reacted after being sentenced. As the judge drops the bombshell and hands Ricky a 40-year sentence, the man's mind seems to short-circuit. As if to confirm what he heard, he asked the judge if that was his sentence.
Did you just give me 40 years, sir? Yes.
Nobody expected that Ricky had a surprise up his sleeve, or rather, in his arm sling.
Closely, Hand reaches into his arm sling and pulls out some cloth that was hiding a small bottle.
This genius had hidden pill bottles filled with his own feces and urine right under his arm the whole time. In the blink of an eye, Ricky whips out those bottles of nastiness and throws them at his defense lawyer. The lawyer got a taste of some foul-smelling justice, and the courtroom went into complete chaos. I guess Ricky wanted to make sure he left a lasting impression in that courtroom, and boy, did he succeed.
You just gave him 40 years. Well, guess what?
So,
Unlike in comedy movies, Ricky's actions have real-life consequences. Ricky is now facing additional charges. That's right, 5 counts of harassment with bodily substances, 1 count for his lawyer, and the other 4 for the poor deputies who got caught in the crossfire. However disgusting you thought Ricky's explosion was, this wasn't the only time a criminal had an obscene outburst in court. There's the case of Seandell Jackson. This is Seandell Jackson, who is facing charges for murder in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In 2010, a 19-year-old named Seandell Jackson attempted to rob Nathan Potter, a 21-year-old student at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, who was returning to his apartment. Unfortunately for them, Potter wasn't carrying any cash, but instead of just walking away and chalking it up as a failed robbery, Jackson shot Potter, tragically ending his young life. Now, you'd expect someone convicted of first-degree intentional homicide and robbery to feel some iota of remorse, right? Well, not Jackson. Throughout the trial, he showed zero remorse and even had the audacity to smirk at Potter's family. Smirking in the face of such a heart-wrenching tragedy, it's enough to make your blood boil.
Looking at us, swearing at us, and smiling.
Nathan's father gave a very emotional victim impact statement during the trial. He asked for the maximum sentence and called Jackson's crimes pure evil.
Nothing that can be said to bring back our Nathan. But your sentence can ensure that Seandell does not have the opportunity as a free man to inflict pain like this again.
Things took a wild turn when the judge finally dropped the hammer and sentenced Jackson to life in prison with no chance of parole. Jackson's anger boiled over, and he unleashed a storm of curses at the judge and court officers. The scene quickly descended into chaos as court officers had to jump in, tackling Jackson and even resorting to pepper spraying him to bring him under control. But the madness didn't end there. Sitting in the back of the courtroom, Jackson's family couldn't resist chiming in. They decided to insult Potter's mother, spewing hatred as if she was responsible for Jackson's heinous crime and sentence. The behavior was very puzzling both for the victim's family and onlookers.
There is some redemption for him at some point, but that's totally up to him. And for his family to say to us, "We hate you," what's that all about? We didn't do a thing to him.
Seandell Jackson didn't seem to think that his crimes required life imprisonment, which led to the outburst. However, he wasn't the only convict who thought they deserved lesser sentences. There was Manson Bryant, who was facing charges for multiple crimes, including robbery and abduction in Ohio.
The court determines that you have or will have the ability to pay restitution.
A familiar face in Judge Lucci's courtroom, Bryant, at 32 years old, has quite the rap sheet, dating back to his juvenile days. He's been in and out of prison multiple times, with at least 8 of his cases landing on Judge Lucci's desk. Talk about a regular customer. So, in his most recent case, Bryant was found guilty of some serious charges.
The verdict was guilty in count 1, aggravated burglary, felony 1, guilty in count 2, aggravated burglary, felony 1, guilty in count 3, aggravated robbery, felony 1, guilty in count 4, felony 1, guilty in count 5, abduction, felony 3, and guilty in count 7, which I renumbered for the jury as count 6.
If you think his crimes were bad, brace yourself for his behavior in court. Bryant's day of reckoning arrived as he stood before Judge Lucci for his sentencing. Initially, Bryant appeared to accept his fate, admitting to a lifetime of bad decisions and expressing respect for the judge's decision.
I made a lifetime of bad decisions.
But brace yourselves, folks, because the respect didn't last long. When Judge Lucci handed down a 22-year sentence, Bryant's true colors poured out in a profanity-laced tirade that echoed through the courtroom. He unleashed a barrage of expletives, accusing the judge of racism and disrespecting his courtroom. But here's where things took an unexpected turn.
The ability to pay restitution.
Fuck your courtroom, you racist ass bitch! Fuck your courtroom, man! You racist as fuck!
Judge Lucci initially considered Bryant's remorse and attempted to be fair, but he changed his mind due to the outburst. Watch as Judge Lucci tries to get his words out between Manson's outburst.
Wait a minute.
You never gave me a chance!
When I said that you had a certain amount of remorse, I was mistaken. So it's 28 years with credit for 231 days.
I don't want to hear it, man!
Judge tacked on an additional 6 years to the sentence, making it 28 years behind bars, but Bryant's defiance continued. He hurled insults even as court deputies led him away.
I don't want to hear it, man! Let me out! Let me out!
About 3 minutes after the incident, Judge Lucci can be heard laughing about the moments that just transpired.
He seemed so calm and cool and civil until the sentence.
According to Judge Lucci, this wasn't the first time Bryant had shown such disrespect. Eventually, the additional 6 years was struck out by a superior court.
It wasn't on the record, but the last time, as he was walking out of the court, he said, "Suck my dick, Judge."
Bryant's outburst may have been uncalled for. However, some cases are so heartrending that outbursts might be overlooked, like the case of Dexter Johnson, who was facing charges for murder in Houston. This tragic story began when Johnson and 4 others carjacked Maria Aparici and Hoi Ngo, her boyfriend, in 2006. The gang held the couple at gunpoint while they took their belongings, then drove them around Houston. Johnson and his accomplice, Keithron Fields, subjected them to a nightmarish ordeal of torture and humiliation. Police reported that Maria Aparici and her boyfriend were shot in the head and left in the woods. It took 5 days before their bodies were discovered. Now in a Harris County courtroom, 19-year-old Dexter Johnson faced his punishment for the crimes he committed. Though Dexter admitted his role in the crime, he was persistent in his defense, claiming that he was not the shooter. Throughout the trial, Johnson remained stone-faced, his eyes fixed on the defense table. But a wave of emotions overwhelmed him when the decision was finally announced: the death penalty. Tears streamed down his face as he looked towards his family, wanting to give them one last wave goodbye. He appeared confused and unsure of what to do next.
Capital murder. In accordance with the laws of the state of Texas, this court hereby assesses your punishment of death. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is going to complete your jury service. I'm going to meet you in the jury room.
All rise.
And then it happened. In an instant, Johnson's rage consumed him, and he hurled a chair across the room. Chaos erupted as officers swiftly tackled him, and the courtroom descended into panic. The scene was heart-wrenching as Johnson's relatives wailed and begged for mercy. 2 of his family members collapsed, requiring immediate medical attention. It was an overwhelming display of raw emotions.
But the mayhem spills out into the hallway.
Amidst the turmoil, the presiding judge, Denise Collins, reached out to console those affected by this dramatic episode. She offered kind words and support to the parents of Maria Aparici, the woman whom Johnson robbed, sexually assaulted, and killed. It was a moment of solace amid chaos. Emotion was a constant presence in this case. Johnson's mother, Renee Johnson, passionately defended her son, declaring his innocence and putting her faith in divine intervention. Protasio Aparici Jr., the grieving father of Maria Aparici, expressed his pain and spoke of the violence inflicted upon his daughter. In a way, it could be said that Johnson got what he deserved, and his outburst was understandable. However, there are other convicts whose punishment seemed lenient and their outbursts confusing. Such is the case of Eric Pendland, who is facing child endangerment charges in Ohio. Pendland was convicted of violently shaking the child, causing permanent disabilities.
Eric Pendland was charged with shaking his then-infant son so violently 2 years ago, the boy is now blind and permanently disabled. I was there as the verdict was read in a courtroom full of emotion.
The abuse occurred when the child was just 3 months old. Sharon Lawson and her husband, who have been dedicated foster parents to disabled and abused children, began caring for Pendland's baby boy in 2017. The now 2-year-old victim was formally adopted by the Lawsons a few weeks before the sentencing and has since relocated out of the area, providing him with a safe and loving environment. The prosecution explained that for the rest of the boy's life,
Eric will rely on others to bathe him, dress him, change his diapers, feed him.
The lifelong consequences of Pendland's actions are devastating and irreversible. Sharon Lawson also expressed the unimaginable agony they endured while caring for the baby. The child's relentless screaming, which lasted for hours on end, left them completely unprepared for the severity of the abuse.
Nothing prepared us for the screaming. Hours and hours of screaming.
It was a very disturbing case indeed. Nevertheless, Pendland insisted that he was innocent.
I've been falsely accused. I've been wrongfully convicted.
If you think that Pendland would be remorseful or that his actions were horrible, you'll be shocked by his behavior in court. Throughout the entire legal process, Pendland showed no remorse. Prosecutors also highlighted Pendland's prior criminal record, including robbery convictions and a federal firearms charge. Due to his previous offenses, mandatory prison time was inevitable in this case, and the prosecution requested the maximum sentence.
I would submit to the court that this entire record is absolutely devoid of any remorse by the defendant.
And the maximum sentence he got. Pendland was sentenced to 11 years in prison. Prosecutors emphasized that Pendland wasn't facing more severe charges because the baby had miraculously survived his injuries. After Pendland heard that he would spend the next decade in prison, he displayed his frustration and disbelief by bowing his head, shaking it, and finally unleashing an outburst of profanity, proclaiming his innocence.
Man. I didn't do anything wrong, man.
If you thought these explosions in court were shocking, you need to see this video of serial killers explaining why they killed in court.